Welcome to the London School of English Live. In today's session with our expert English language trainer, Ziad Al-Rawi, you will be able to improve your business English vocabulary by learning a range of new phrasal verbs. We hope that this will be one of the steps to bring your business English to the next level. And you will also be able to ask your questions in an interactive question and answer session at the end of the live stream. So please share your questions and comments in the live chat next to the video. This session is sponsored by the London School of English, where you can choose a wide range of English courses targeted to your needs. And you can find out more by visiting our website, www.londonschool.com, and we'll share the website later on screen. So here with us today, we also have our sales and marketing director, Joe Burns, who will tell you more about our virtual courses before the main part of the session. Welcome, Joe and Ziad. Great to have you here. And Joe, over to you for the information about our virtual training.
Thank you, Olga. Evening, everybody, or good morning, depending where you are. So we're running a lot of very popular virtual group courses at the moment. This is where you can take a virtual group course in IELTS preparation, in business English, in general English, in legal English, and we put together multicultural groups from different countries at a time zone to suit the participants, and you can study full time, that's 15 hours per week for as many weeks as you like, and we're using Zoom because that's good for breakout rooms and for people to come together and see each other clearly and interact live with their trainer. You can also, if you want to, you can form your own groups and have us train your own groups and do that part-time. So whether you have some colleagues you think you could all do 2 hours a week together for a few weeks, or maybe you want some individual training. But we have lots of lovely flexible options so everyone can still carry on learning even if they can't travel.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And we've got one of the quotes from a client just to illustrate what you've just mentioned, as well as the URL of our virtual group courses. So here it is. Yeah, that's Taishi from Japan. Yeah,
we're having very good feedback from our clients. Some of our clients have come to visit us before and studied with us in London, and then come back to study with us online, and have enjoyed both experiences.
Great, thank you. And I also want to say hello to everyone who is joining us at the moment. We've got our alumni, Frank Kuntz, joining us. Great to have you here, Frank. And we're also saying hello to Kwaku Apia, who is glad to call us live. Yes, that's right. We do have this live stream session, but we also will have this as a recorded video, so you can practice your English even after the session as well. So Ziad, now over to you for the main content on phrasal verbs in business English.
Thank you very, very much, Olga. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hello there. Yes, hello, Frank and Kwaku and Lionel, who's just joined us as well. So thank you very much, and welcome to everyone. So to get started with the top 25 business phrasal verbs, well, in order to obviously help us to get started, it will be very useful, obviously, to know what is a phrasal verb. So let's go firstly just to a definition that hopefully many will either be familiar with or will be something new to some people. So a phrasal verb is a phrase that consists of a verb with a preposition or adverb or both, and the meaning of which is different from the meaning of its separate parts. So for example, if we look at a verb like to pick, so we have to pick flowers, but then if we add the preposition up, to pick up, one possible phrasal verb definition of that is to collect. So for example, to pick up the kids from school. And I'll be giving this as a further example a little later on. So why are phrasal verbs important? So they're commonly used, and although they're of an informal nature, they appear a lot in business, as maybe some of you have experienced when speaking with native English speakers, as they're the ones that commonly use this. And of course, when you do hear them, you may initially struggle because you think, okay, I don't quite understand what the word pick up means, as an example. And then, as I just explained just now, you may have heard the verb to pick. So you've heard the verb to pick flowers or to pick fruit from a tree, but you've never heard the phrasal verb pick up. So now you're thinking, so what does this mean? So this can be obviously challenging when you are not familiar with these phrasal verbs. And hopefully during this live stream, we're going to give you some of the most commonly used phrasal verbs, which you can begin to hopefully learn and understand and begin to actively apply in your working environment, and if not, maybe even in your studying environment, depending on where you are at this moment in time in your journey. Just a quick tip, if you work with native English speakers, you may notice them using these expressions that I've just mentioned now. And if you do hear an expression being used and it sounds like a phrasal verb as in accordance with the definition, then you can always ask them to explain it to you, what exactly it means, and maybe make a mental note of it. And obviously, if you have time, write it down so that you can begin to hopefully activate it within your own language as you develop your English language skills. Now, of course, phrasal verbs will appear in lots of different areas, as well as in business. You'll obviously use them, for example, when you're on holiday or when you're traveling. So they will vary. And if you are interested in developing this further, then a recommendation would be to look at some phrasal verbs, for example, for travel, and maybe learn 3 or 4 of them so that you can then begin to use them and apply them when you're on your holidays. As I think for many of us, although obviously not at the moment, but when hopefully things do improve, we'll be able to use them at that time. But it's good to get it ready from now. So hopefully when the time comes, you can use it. So now we're going to be looking at some phrasal verbs, and I suppose before we do so, if you have used phrasal verbs yourself, either at work or generally in your general English language journey, do feel free to type them into the live chat box, and in the cases where you are able to do so, also put them maybe into the context in which either you heard them or you used them yourself, and what you understood from it, as I think that this will be something very useful. And yes, great, Frank has already contributed in that way, which is fantastic. So build up, excellent, good, Frank. So it'd be interesting to know what you understand by to build up, and if we have time, I'll definitely come back to it a little later on. For the purposes of trying to put these phrasal verbs into context for you, I've put together a business scenario with some telephone conversations and a face-to-face meeting between 2 people. And from this exercise, we're going to look at how these phrasal verbs are used, and we're going to get you to hopefully try to participate. So if you can grab yourself a pen or paper, pen and paper, or a pencil and paper, and begin to make a note as we go through the exercises. See if you can identify which are the phrasal verbs in the various conversations that you're going to see. And then at the end, I will, of course, explain to you the verb behind the phrasal verb, so that if you don't understand it, you'll understand it better. Of course, if you do understand it, please feel free to type it into the chat box as well, as it will show your own development, which would be great. So I'm going to introduce you now to the 2 characters in this particular business scenario. So we have Tom Jones, who works as a business lending advisor for Spartan Finance. He provides advice to small and medium-sized enterprises on the types of loans available for small and medium-sized enterprises. And he is advising Prism Architects on the business loan for the office equipment they are in the process of buying. And we also have Jane Smith. She is the head of purchasing at Prism Architects, which is a medium-sized architect firm looking to expand into new offices and looking to buy new equipment. So what we're going to do then is we're going to start with the first telephone conversation between these 2. And there are actually 3 phrasal verbs in this first telephone conversation. So I'm going to read out the conversation to you, and once I do so, and it's also going to come up on the screen as well, see if you can identify the phrasal verbs that are mentioned, and also, if you can, try to understand what they actually mean in this context. So let's start with telephone conversation number 1. So Tom Jones says, "Good morning. Can you put me through to Mrs. Smith?" And reception says, "Please hold. I'll try to connect you." And there's a short pause. "I'm sorry, she's not picking up. would you like to leave a message? And Tom Jones says, no, it's okay. I'll call back later. Okay, so as you can see here, it's a very short conversation, very common one. Some of you maybe have had such a telephone conversation. And let's see if you've managed to identify maybe any of the phrasal verbs. I can tell you that there is actually in this particular telephone conversation, there is a phrasal verb in each sentence. Okay, so if you've managed to write them down, well done. If you haven't, don't worry. There's still time to get more in. But let's have a look at them then. So the first phrasal verb is put through. So can you put me through to Mrs. Smith? Oh, very good. Lionel, hot off on this one. Great stuff. So yes, so to put through, exactly. So this means to connect. So good morning, can you connect me to Mrs. Smith? And then reception says, please hold, I'll try to connect you. And then I'm sorry, she's not picking up. In this case, so she's not lifting up her phone or handset in order to be able to answer the call. And then, of course, would you like to leave a message? And finally, no, it's okay. I'll call back later today. So to call back is to call again later. So yeah, well done to those that have managed to answer it. So Robin, if I've pronounced it correctly, and Lena, well done. Good, excellent. Let us move on to conversation number 2. This is also a short conversation, and this one only actually has one phrasal verb in it. So this should hopefully maybe be a little bit easier, maybe not. Let's see. So Tom Jones says, good afternoon. Can I speak to Mrs. Smith? But not all of the words can be heard clearly. So reception says, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Can you repeat that again, please? And Tom Jones says, sorry, I'm on a train, so the reception isn't great. I was asking to speak to, and then the line goes dead. And reception says, hello, hello. So in this one, as I say, there is only one phrasal verb. And see if you can identify which one it is. And if you're also able to do so in the chat box, also type what you understand from it. Okay, so, oh, very good. We've got some excellent learners here. So we've got Robin, Boaz, Victor, Lionel, Frank. Well done, everyone. Well done. And it'll be good to know if you also know what it means then as well. So you've identified the correct phrasal verb. If you can also type in the meaning, that will be also good as well. So let's just go through this again. So Tom Jones says, good afternoon. Can I speak to Mrs. Smith? And then not all of the words can be heard clearly. And then reception says, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. So breaking up, can you repeat that again, please? So basically you're unclear, you're inaudible, your voice is not clear, so I cannot hear what you are saying. Okay, so this is breaking up. So there is still conversation taking place. You can still hear something, but it's not very clear. So you are breaking up. Okay, good. Let's move on then to the final telephone conversation. It's the third one. And in this one, we have 5 phrasal verbs in this one. So we have 5 phrasal verbs to try to identify. So I'm going to read the telephone conversation and let's see if you can identify them. And if you can also mention their meaning as well, if you're able to do so. So let us start. Tom Jones. Hello, sorry, I just called a few moments ago, but we got cut off. The train went through a tunnel. Can I speak to Mrs. Smith? Reception. Can I ask who's calling? Tom Jones. Yes, it's Mr. Jones from Spartan Finance. Reception. Please hold. Putting you through now. Tom Jones. Thank you. Jane Smith. Mrs. Smith speaking. Tom Jones. Good afternoon, Mrs. Smith. It's Mr. Jones from Spartan Finance. I tried getting through to you earlier, but I understand you were busy. Are you free to speak now? Jane Smith. Hello, Mr. Jones. Yes, I'm free now. Tom Jones. Great. I just wanted to talk to you about the meeting we have scheduled for next Monday at 10 a.m. I've had something come up and wanted to know if we can put the meeting back to Wednesday at the same time. Jane, sure. Let me just check my diary for Wednesday. Yes, that should be fine. Tom Jones, thank you very much for understanding and for being so accommodating. I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Bye. Jane says goodbye. Okay, so it's a longer conversation, but there are 5 phrasal verbs in there. And let's see if you can identify them. I think in one of the cases, you should definitely know one of them, as one of them was actually mentioned in one of the earlier conversations in a slightly different grammatical form, but it's the same phrasal verb with the same meaning. Good. Yes, we seem to have some great feedback here. Yes, good, excellent. Excellent. Yeah, guys, you're doing really, really well, all of you. Some really, really good feedback here. Excellent. Again, yes, from the same. So Boaz and Robin and Frank, Lionel, absolutely brilliant. Excellent. Okay, then. So let's go through this then, as it looks like we've got some great feedback coming through in terms of the identification of the phrasal verbs. So Tom Jones says, hello, sorry, I just called a few moments ago, but we got cut off. So cut off meaning disconnected. So we were disconnected. The train went through a tunnel. So can I speak to Mrs. Smith? And the reception says, can I ask who's calling? And Tom Jones says, yes, it's Mr. Jones from Spartan Finance. And the reception says again, please hold. And then this time putting you through now, so connecting you now. Tom Jones says, thank you. And then Jane says, Mrs. Smith speaking. And Tom Jones then says, good afternoon, Mrs. Smith. It's Mr. Jones from Spartan Finance. I tried getting through to you earlier, but I understand you were busy. So getting through, I tried to reach you earlier, but I understand that you were busy. So are you free to speak now? Okay. And then Mrs. Smith says, hello, Mr. Jones. Yes, I'm free now. And then Tom Jones says, great. I just wanted to talk to you about the meeting we have scheduled for next Monday at 10 a.m. I've had something come up. So when something comes up, it means something has happened. It could be an emergency or something like that. And so I wanted to know if we can put the meeting back to Wednesday at the same time. So to put back here means basically to start later than the originally planned time. So we planned to start, for example, on Monday, but now we are going to actually start this later on. Okay. Excellent. Good. So now we are going to move on to the meeting between Mr. Jones and Mrs. Smith. So this is a face-to-face meeting that they've arranged for Wednesday at 10 a.m. And in this particular scenario, there are going to be 13 phrasal verbs, 1-3. So there's quite a few to listen out for, but I'm sure that you will at least be able to pick some of them up. Okay, so we'll get started. So the meeting starts with Tom Jones saying, hello, Mrs. Smith. It's nice to finally meet you. And Jane Smith says, hello, Mr. Jones. Please call me Jane. And Tom Jones says, certainly, Jane. And please call me Tom. So Jane says, okay, Tom, would you like something to drink, tea or coffee? And Tom says, actually, a glass of water would be nice. And then Jane says, of course. There you are. Now, we have a number of things to discuss today. Shall we deal with the first item regarding requirements? As you know, we want to acquire 10 new desktops, 5 new laptops, 10 desks and chairs, 2 photocopiers, 2 printers, and 1 3D printer. And then Jane says, and then Tom says, yes, I have noted down all those items on my list of requirements. Is there anything else? And then Jane says, I was thinking about whether we should also invest in a new video conferencing suite, as our existing one is a little dated. Do you have any suggestions? And Tom says, there are quite a few video conferencing options available, but some of the more well-known are Zoom, GoToMeeting, and LifeSites. I can find out some estimated costs for the above companies and email them to you by the end of the week. Jane says, that would be great. Let's move on to the costs of the loan. You've sent me your figures, and I was wondering if there was anything that you could do about the interest rate. It's a little higher than I was expecting. Tom says, I'm sure I can work something out. I'll get back to you by the end of the week or beginning of next week. So Jane says, thank you. By the way, did you see on the news that Debenhams are closing all their stores and 12,000 jobs could be lost? It's incredible how many people are being laid off. And Tom responds to this by saying, no, I don't watch the news. Anyway, I think we're moving away from the points to discuss. Can we come back to the point about costs? Once we've agreed the figures, we'll send you the agreement to sign along with a direct debit mandate so that you can set up a direct debit for the monthly installments to be taken from your account. And Jane says, okay, that's all clear. So to sum up, you're going to look into what you can do about the interest rate and also email me details about video conferencing costs so that we can then finalize everything, so that we can finalize everything. Is there anything I've missed? Tom says, no, I think that's everything. Thanks for your time. And Jane says, thank you for coming, and I look forward to receiving your emails. Goodbye. And Tom says, goodbye. So I know there's an awful lot in there, and I believe that maybe if some of you are watching this video stream now on a smaller device like a mobile or something, the text probably looks very small, but rest assured there is a recording of this so that hopefully you can watch it again and be able to watch it on a larger screen where you can see the text in larger font as well. So let's see if some of the phrasal verbs, yeah, excellent, excellent. Yes, there's some already that's been taken out. Well done, excellent. Yes, note down, well done. And work out, very good, yeah. Brilliant, yeah, so there's some great feedback coming through here. Absolutely brilliant. So you're obviously whizzes at phrasal verbs, which is great. Well done, Leonel, well done, really good. Yes, I think you've got the majority of them there. Yeah, excellent, very good. Okay, let's go through this together then, so that you have a full list here of these phrasal verbs. So let's start from the beginning of the meeting again. So it started with Tom saying, hello, Mrs. Smith. It's nice to finally meet you. And then Jane says, hello, Mr. Jones. Please call me Jane. And then Tom says, certainly, Jane. And please call me Tom. And Jane says, okay, Tom, would you like something to drink, tea or coffee? And Tom says, actually, a glass of water would be nice. And Jane then says, of course. There you are. Now, we have a number of things to discuss today. Shall we deal with? Now, this phrasal verb deal with in this context means talk about. So shall we talk about the first item regarding requirements? Now, one thing I probably should have also mentioned with phrasal verbs that there are phrasal verbs like this one, for example, deal with, that can have more than one meaning. So it very much depends on the context. And if we had more time, I would go into more detail. But this is something I can touch upon a little bit later on. But if we continue for now, as you know, we want to acquire 10 new desktops, 5 new laptops, 10 desks and chairs, 2 photocopiers, 2 printers, and 1 3D printer. And then Tom Jones responds, yes, I have noted down. So in this case, it's to make a note of something. So I have noted down all those items on my list of requirements. Is there anything else? And then Jane says, I was thinking about, so in this context here, to think about is to consider. Yeah, so I was thinking about whether we should also invest in a new video conferencing suite, as our existing one is a little dated. Do you have any suggestions? And then Tom says, there are quite a few video conferencing options available, but some of the more well-known are Zoom, GoToMeeting, and Lifesize. I can find out, so to find out, meaning to discover. So I can find out some estimated costs for the above companies and email them to you by the end of the week. So in this case, to find out, because he doesn't have this information with him, either on his systems or with him at all, it's something he will have to go and actually discover himself with the new information and then let Jane know about it. And then if we then turn back to Jane in her further response, she then says, that would be great. Let's move on to. So the next phrasal verb here is to move on to, which means let's change subject. So let's change the subject to the costs of the loan. So let's move on to the costs of the loan. You've sent me your figures, and I was wondering if there was anything that you could do about the interest rate. It's a little higher than I was expecting. And Tom says, I'm sure I can work something out. So in this case, as was identified by Lionel, well done. To work out in this case means to arrange. I'm sure I can arrange basically something to satisfy you. And then he also says, I'll get back to you. So to get back to someone means to talk to someone again after, in this case, finding out what he can do about the interest rate situation. So I'll get back to you by the end of the week or beginning of next week. Okay. And then Jane says, thank you. By the way, did you see on the news that Debenhams are closing all their stores and 12,000 jobs could be lost? It's incredible how many people are being laid off. So the last here is actually the last word in the sentence of laid off, which means to be made redundant. So in this case, because of the economic situation, unfortunately, a large number of people are going to be made redundant, so to be laid off. And then if we continue, Tom Jones then says, no, I don't watch the news. Anyway, I think we're moving away from the points to discuss. So to move away from something in this context means to digress. So we're supposed to be talking about the loans and stuff, and now Jane is sort of turning the attention to something unrelated to what they're supposed to be talking about. So he says, I think we're moving away from the points to discuss. So can we come back to? So to come back to in this context means to return. So to come back to the point about costs. Once we've agreed the figures, we'll send you the agreement to sign along with a direct debit mandate so that you can set up a direct debit, so that you can basically to start a direct debit for the monthly installments to be taken from your account. And then Jane says, okay, that's all clear. So to sum up is another phrasal verb meaning to summarize. So to sum up, you're going to look into what you can do about the interest rate. So to look into is to examine or to investigate what they can do in order to see if something can be done about the interest rate, and also email me details about video conferencing costs so that we can then finalize everything. Is there anything else I've missed? Tom says, no, I think that's everything. Thanks for your time. And Jane says, thank you for coming, and I look forward to receiving your emails. Goodbye. And Tom says, goodbye. So those are the phrasal verbs in the contexts. And if you were counting, you may have realized that we didn't give 25 there. We've actually given 21. So there are actually 4 more phrasal verbs I just wanted to also mention, which I couldn't quite fit into the dialogue. So I just thought I'd mention to you now. So you remember I mentioned about the phrasal verb to put back. And so in this, and this was obviously something where to start something later than originally planned. The opposite to that is to bring forward. So when you want to bring forward something, is you want it to start earlier than originally planned. So for example, if you were planning to start something on Friday, and now you're going to bring it forward to Wednesday, so it starts earlier than the originally planned time. Okay, so I give an example here is, can we bring the meeting forward from Thursday to Tuesday? So the meeting was supposed to take place on Thursday, but you're bringing it forward to Tuesday because of something that's happening on Thursday. So that's one phrasal verb. The other one is to call off. And in the context that I'm talking about it, to call off means to cancel. And a sentence I can give you here is, the meeting was called off due to an emergency at the factory. Okay, so to call off means to cancel. So they had to cancel the meeting due to an emergency at the factory. Okay. And another phrasal verb as well, which you may have heard, is to join in. So if you want somebody to join in, you're asking them maybe to participate in whatever it is that you're doing. So in this context here, you might say to someone like, for example, Sam, why aren't you joining in the discussion? Why aren't you joining in the discussion? Why aren't you participating in the discussion? And the last one is to bear with. To bear with. And this is to basically to be patient with someone, to wait for someone. And it could be something within a short space of time, or maybe even a longer period of time. And so, for example, if you're on the phone and you're listening to someone, and maybe you want to write down what it is that they're telling you, and you just say to them, can you bear with me for a moment? I'm just getting a pen, because they obviously want to make a note of what it is that you have said to them. Okay, so those are the 25 phrasal verbs that are used frequently in business, both as you see here. I've given you two contexts. I've given you in telephone conversations, which is one area where it's commonly used, and also within meetings as well. It will be interesting to know, of course, and please feel free to put in the feedback as well, if you've used any of these phrasal verbs, or if you've heard any of them, and perhaps in what context you've used them. And I can see here that that quite a few of you have got some queries as well, I think, here to put back. Yes, well done. Yeah, Lino, you've mentioned about the phrasal verb to put back. Thank you. That's actually a good point to come back to the issue. As I mentioned when I gave the phrasal verb to deal with, I did mention that the same phrasal verb could have several meanings. And in some cases, yes, to put back could be meaning, yeah, to postpone to another time. Absolutely right. So that's another good example of that. So thank you very much for that. And Kwaku, you're asking, is it formal to use phrasal verbs like to get back to in business communications? Not really. No, as I said, generally speaking, with phrasal verbs, they're considered probably more informal in their nature, but it's quite common to use these types of phrasal verbs. So it wouldn't be an issue if you did want to say to somebody, you know, I'll get back to you, for example, later today or next week, depending, of course, on what the matter is. So it's not an issue as such if you did want to use it within your business communications, Kwaku. Not a problem at all. And thank you very much for the question as well. Okay, well, of course, as more questions come in, I'll be happy to answer them. But perhaps if you want to maybe go back to Olga as well, and to Joe, as I know that they've got some more things to tell us, and hopefully that was helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ziad. It was really interesting to look at our viewers answering the questions and guessing the phrasal verbs, and it's great to see all of the responses. In fact, it was just a great question from Kwaku as well, because usually we prepare some questions that we frequently get from our clients, but Kwaku almost preempted one of the questions in terms of formal and informal use of the phrasal verb. So that's fantastic. And I guess one of the questions that quite frequently comes up, just watching our clients take our courses, participate in different social activities during the school, at the school, is what would you say are the most frequent phrasal verb mistakes that you notice among our clients, particularly the ones taking business and professional courses? And are there particular factors that influence them? For example, maybe their first language or the level of English. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes, of course. It's fairly from my experience. I found that actually a lot of the time, it's a bit of the confusion comes in relation to the prepositional side of things when they're trying to use a particular phrasal verb. So and because prepositions themselves can be quite a complex area for many people, it leads to a lot of confusion. And of course, this is where it's so important to be able to make sure that if you are going to use a phrasal verb, you have to make sure you understand it exactly as it is. Otherwise, the sentence will simply not make sense, although it probably, especially with a native English speaker, they probably will understand it. But from an accuracy point of view, yes, it won't come across as clear as you would want it to. So, you know, the main thing, of course, is if you're going to use any phrasal verbs at all, do make sure that you understand them and you obviously use them exactly as they are written. So, you know, to say, you know, to put down or to pick up, and all of these things can be confusing, but you have to make sure that you do understand them before you put them into practice. Yeah,
thank you. And Joe, what's your take on this? Because you communicate with our clients a lot. So maybe if you can share your experience with that, and also your experience with, because we have more questions, for example, from Rojbin Afsar asking about formal and informal use of phrasal verbs, for example, in this case, mixed up as an example. So what would you say?
I think in answer to Robin's question, I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying mixed up. I think it's just clear English.
Yeah.
You might, in some circumstances, prefer to use the word confused, but it depends on the context.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with saying mixed up. to say, you know, oh, I mixed up these things together, or I mixed up what was supposed to be, you know, it implies confusion. So I think that would be fine in most contexts. I think that in talking to people, it really is just about practice and about memorizing, the same as in some other languages. In all languages, there are regular and irregular verbs, and you just learn your way through those, memorizing and practicing. I think it's similar in this situation. For me, sometimes as a language learner, drawing things in a visual way can be helpful. So if you think about some phrasal verbs that use on or off, or some that use up and down, or some that use in and out, or away and around, potentially drawing yourself a form of mind map and thinking about which are common uses or common pairings, and then remembering, you know, what are the differences between, as Ziad was saying about pick or pick up, just, you know, a lot of practice in that way, but sometimes making little groups for yourself can be a useful way of breaking down what is quite a big subject. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, as my mother always says, you eat an elephant a bite at a time.
Yeah, that's a great saying. And also, yeah, otherwise it may seem unsurmountable almost, kind of, because this list of phrasal verbs can be continued. Right. Yeah. And that actually your example of one way of remembering phrasal verbs with kind of being more visual, just kind of to circle back to this. So Ziad and Joe, in terms of your tips or on learning and remembering phrasal verbs, and just generally improving conversational business English, what would you say would be kind of your main tips in this case?
Want to go ahead, Joe, or shall I start?
No, please do.
Yeah, okay. Well, definitely try. It actually takes further on from what Joe was saying about, you know, eating an elephant one bite at a time. Is if you're going to learn, this applies, of course, with language generally, but if we're talking about phrasal verbs as we are at this moment in time, to take some of them in the context in which you would normally use them. So as I've given you examples now, I've given you 2 business areas, meetings and telephone language. So you can start there, because these are things, hopefully, either you are already doing commonly already, or you're hopefully going to be doing it in the future. And so in this situation, you can group them exactly like that. So for telephone language, you've got telephone phrasal verbs, you've got meeting phrasal verbs, etc., etc. So you can build up in that way and try to learn them, you know, in small numbers. So 2 or 3 at any time. And then, of course, once you've learned them and you've understood them, you begin to actively apply them to your language and try to use them. So even if you are not, for example, working in an environment, or you are studying in an environment where English is a commonly used language, every opportunity, of course, you can use it, then try to do it in those situations so that it stays fresh and it stays active in your memory, so that when you then do want to use it and call upon it, it will come naturally rather than you having to think about it. And sometimes it's a good thing to do is to actually just have them written down in front of you, so that you can look at them, you know, from time to time. And hopefully the more regularly you do that, the more you're likely to obviously have them ingrained in your mind and you'll remember them. But as Joe said, it does ultimately come down to practice. So when if you are in a working situation and you are having to use English already, that's fantastic, because that means you have the opportunity to do so. But if you're not in that kind of a situation, I suppose it's a situation where maybe, if you can, try to network with people who are English speakers, and just have light conversations. I'm sure you must know somebody, and if you don't, well, the London School of English is probably the best place to start then, because, you know, their ability to network and their networking groups are second to none, and you'll have all of the support that you need there anyway. So this is something that I can highly recommend. Yeah. So,
no, I would agree, and I think if you want conversational practice, obviously you can have that through individual classes, but you can also do that through our LinkedIn and Facebook networks, or little bits and pieces here in our live streams as well. So I'm sure people are always happy to chat on our social networks. And then when we go back to Holland Park, then there's even more opportunity if people come see us in London.
Yes.
So yes, lots of opportunities for practice.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And you did mention the virtual courses earlier in the live stream. So, of course, at the moment, this is a great way for people to participate as well. And I've just got a very short video of how this may look like. So just to show those people who haven't yet had the chance to participate in our online training with our trainers. For example, one of them is Ziad. So you can always find out more on our website as well.
If I may, I should mention I have a little bit of news, which is that we are developing some new online courses to add to our portfolio. So these will be online general English and online business English with an hour per week of one-to-one with a trainer as a package. So that will be launching at the end of February. So we'll bring you more news about that when we have it. So just a little teaser, as we say. Yeah, so we will share this news on our social media and also on YouTube. I'm sure, Joe, you'll find out more information. Before we wrap up, we actually have one more question from one of our clients, which is always great to see, from Adriana Martinez.
Yes. That's a great question, and I have to say, probably it comes back to the point about having to sort of memorize them, because there are obviously some phrasal verbs which go together as you see them, and there are others that can be separated. I'm not aware of a specific key, as I think was asked. Was it a key? Yeah, a key or clue specifically. I think it is just down to having to sort of memorize them in the way that they are used. I'm sorry there isn't a magic answer to that particular question, although it is a great question. But as I said, I'm not aware of one. But if I do come across one, then I'll definitely mention it as well. And one thing also to add, by the way, in terms of the list of the 25 phrasal verbs, we are going to include them with this video as well, aren't we, Olga? My understanding is correct there, yes?
Yeah, that's right. After this session, you would have the recorded video almost immediately, and we will share the list of the verbs as well, together with examples. Yes.
Can I just ask? So, Adriana, I'm not sure if we've understood your question correctly. I think what you're saying there is there a reason, because you have figure it out, and of course the phrasal verb is figure out, and you're talking about interrupting it with it, aren't you? So you're saying, how do we know whether it's put it down or put down it, figure it out or put... So I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is when can you interrupt it with another element of speech? Yeah,
it depends. As I say, it depends very much on the phrasal verb, and I think that's where it unfortunately we probably don't have really time to go into a lot of depth here. But it is something that one would need to sort of discuss in a lot more detail, because it's not something that because there are transitive and intransitive, and that's where we become a little bit more technical in trying to explain that situation. And as I say, unfortunately, I don't think we've got enough time to handle it here, though.
So that sounds like another live stream.
It does.
Yeah, that's it. And
excellent, Adriana.
It's a great question, though. As I said, it's a fantastic question. Yes, definitely.
Yes, and of course, one can never stop learning, whether by kind of self-study or online or in virtual groups or face-to-face. So for any of our viewers, if you've got any questions about our courses, then you can always find out more information on our website, which I will just again share here on screen. And as well, you can contact us on our email, clients@londonschool.com, after this live stream if you've got any questions about the courses. If you've got questions about English, specifically related to this particular topic, we will endeavor to answer those questions in the comments below the video. Yes, so on this note, I would like to say many thanks to everyone, all of our viewers who are joining us today, for sharing your time. We already have really nice comments coming up from Roj bin Afzar. Great, yeah, it's been great to see so much participation from our viewers, and we hope to see you again on our live streams and also in our classes, virtually or face-to-face or online. And as it is, I also would like to say huge thanks to Ziad and to Joe for joining, for sharing your tips and advice and knowledge. And as it is a good tradition, Ziad and Joe, if you could just say a few encouraging words to our viewers who are learning English, what would they be?
Want to start, Joe, or shall I again?
For me, at the moment, I would say just listen to the radio a lot. If you're at home more at the and while you're doing the housework.
Thank you, Joe. I think there was a little bit of an interruption with the audio. We could see you. So what we could hear is that listening to the radio is very important. Could you? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I was saying if we are having to spend more time at home at the moment, listening to the radio when you're doing other tasks is good. Yes, Radio 4 is good.
It is. Totally agree. Totally agree.
Great. And Ziad, how about you?
Yeah. Alongside listening, reading, of course, is equally good, because you'll find, especially as I'm sure many of you probably are reading the news on a regular basis, you'll actually find if you read the news articles, you'll commonly see phrasal verbs mentioned in there. So maybe as an exercise for you, as well as reading the news itself and obviously learning what's going on around the world, see if you can identify phrasal verbs in there. And if you can, like, for example, I gave you the phrasal verb laid off, for example. So those kind of business terms you are definitely going to see in newspaper articles, and see if you can identify any more and give yourself a bit of a challenge as well. So not only do you get information about what you're what you're learning about the world, but you'll improve your English as well. So go for that too.
Great. Thank you, Ziad, and thank you, Joe. And we hope that all of our viewers are keeping safe and well. And please keep learning English, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be safe and healthy.